The British Empire administered nearly 14 million square miles and 412 million lives at the height of its power. Put another way, 25% each of the world's total population and global landmass, making it the largest empire in history. The Mongol Empire follows closely behind, the Roman Empire and countless others whose ruined civilizations act as foundation for our own. But even Britain's milestone pales in comparison to the galactic empires that sprawl across the cosmos and through works of fantasy, science fiction, in media from books to tabletop games to video games. Galactic empires are a mainstay of inventive world building, massive governments measured in light years, containing mega-billions that seem as permanent as time. But how do they form? What promotes their planetary expansion? And what leads to their inevitable decline? Analyzing 5 of the greatest and most infamous of all time: Foundation's Galactic Empire of Trantor, the Carino Empire of Dune, its successor the Atreides Empire, Star Wars and Warhammer 40k will chart a course from their inception to their end. This is the life and death of galactic empires. Empire is a loose and contested term, but broadly it's an entity of massive size that administers various territories, military installations, and peoples. Author and Professor Stephen Howe describes it as a major political unit having a territory of great extent, or a number of territories or peoples under a single sovereign authority. Michael Doyle, meanwhile, prefers the socio-behavioral definition of empire as effective control, whether formal or informal, of a subordinate society by an imperial society. Although definitions differ, there are general qualities that categorize all empires. The first is scale. An empire extends far beyond the natural and fixed borders of a nation-state, and its own borders are often in flux, depending on alliance or military endeavors. The second is a central core that consolidates authority and power. Described as the metropole or the home region, it acts like the axle to exercise control over the peripheral wheel through spokes of wealth, clout, and aggression. The third is complex multiculturalism, with diverse groups and overlapping jurisdictions. Unlike a kingdom or nation-state, an empire rules over many ethnicities and cultures. Its political structure is nebulous, not the rigid hierarchy of a smaller entity. An individual could therefore have at the same time ties to their city, their region, and their empire with mixed duties. When we think of empire, our minds conjure images of the ruthless, cowled Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars, or the marbled statues of Rome's Caesars. But despite its name, an empire isn't always ruled by an emperor or empress. Some are founded and governed in a republican form of government, in contrast to dictatorship. Occasionally, they form as a federation of states, ultimately and involuntarily bound to a central authority. Nearly all historical empires are forged in the fires of conquest. Either through military expansion or acquisition of a previously ruined empire, they gather more territory, which contrasts with some of the galactic empires. Now that we know what empire means, how does one arise and induce the classic trope of crack imperial troops vaporizing planets in the name of their leader? Regardless of their size or longevity, all galactic empires follow a life cycle that can be divided into 5 phases: foundation, expansion, maturation, decline, and death. The look and length of these phases is unique to each empire, but at least in the fictional world, their fates are all determined. It must start with a bang. No ruler, despite what records may show, would admit that their great empire just sort of quietly congealed. A vague and haphazard founding, barely worthy of a footnote. No, an empire requires a strong base, a legendary event or superhuman leader that flashed as lightning and raised the people from obscurity. The birth of an empire determines how resilient its life will be, and how long. Foundational mythos establish a level of superiority. They act like great beacons of the past one can point to and say, "This is why we conquered. This is why we're better. This is why we're deserving." When such events aren't so easily at hand, they're often fabricated by future generations. For especially ancient or long-lived empires, this blurs the line between history and myth. In our own history, those of antiquity such as Rome, the Achaemenid Empire, and Zhou dynasty of China have a flair for mixing their foundings with mythological tales of gods, blessing them with divine authority. It's through heaven's mandate that they are superior and charged with the purpose of ruling. From their birth, the ancient empires were made to be superior. But what of those that expand beyond Earth? We see this kind of historical fantasy reflected in House Carino that rules the Imperium of Mankind in Frank Herbert's Dune. The Dune saga tells the tale of humanity's struggle for survival in a harsh, unforgiving universe. Their great houses are led by the Padishah Emperor atop his lion throne. Over 10,000 years have passed since the establishment of the lion throne. Few accounts remain, and those that do have been translated, misinterpreted, or altogether fictionalized. The only thing clear is that in the year 88 BG, the Battle of Corin took place, and in its aftermath, the ruling house from the planet Seleucus Secundus assumed the name Carino and established their new empire. One source claims the Battle of Corin was a struggle fought between humans, while another posits that it was the ultimate victory of the Butlerian Jihad, the final battle against thinking machines that secured humanity's freedom and triumph over artificial intelligence. House Carino uses the myth of Corin to assert their right to rule, and over millennia of biased histories, their lineage grows inseparable from that ancient founding. Oftentimes, the birth of an empire rests on the shoulders of a leader who has transcended mortality. The Dune Saga sees another galactic empire rise under the leadership of Paul Atreides and his son Leto II. A flare of propaganda and religious mysticism surrounds the Atreides empire. Paul's mother, Lady Jessica, manipulates the religion of native Fremen tribesmen on the planet Arrakis to secure her son's ascendancy. They begin to see him as a prophet and messiah who will save them from harsh wandering and deliver them to paradise. This belief spreads like wildfire across the universe as his Fremen warriors conquer and convert many worlds. Paul's father becomes a martyr, and Paul, his mother Jessica, and his son Leto are worshipped as a holy triumvirate within their religion, which underpins the mythos of the Atreides Empire. Paul's time as emperor is short, but Leto rules for 3,500 years, and he is thrust into godhood. What's interesting is that Leto's empire is structured and ruled in such a manner to inoculate mankind against empires, to make them unruly and to spread them across the universe. He's guided by an oracular vision called the Golden Path to secure humanity's survival against all possible futures, and he rules in the pharaonic model of the ancient past to breed, in his words, individuals who tended to be short-lived, superstitious, and easily led by a god-king. Taken as a whole, they were a powerful people. Their survival as a species became a habit. Likewise, the Imperium of Mankind in Warhammer 40k claims a powerful foundation myth centered on reverence of a godlike ruler. Warhammer's dark future sees humanity in a state of constant warfare against alien Xenos races and the forces of chaos that seethe within another plane of existence. It's a grim, brutal, and short reality, but one light glimmers for humanity: faith in the God Emperor. Over 10,000 years ago, the Emperor, also known as the Master of Mankind, publicly emerged and single-handedly pulled the race from darkness amid the Age of Strife, a period of apocalypse and fragmentation that predated the Imperium. More than most fictional rulers, 40k's Emperor is quite nearly a god. Possessed of immortality, superhuman psychic abilities, and lethal cunning, he is said to have been the reincarnation of all humankind's prior psychics. Through his unparalleled power, the God Emperor led the unification wars on Earth, which established a united empire of mankind that could then collectively conquer the stars. It's his image in which the Adeptus Astartes, more famously known as the Space Marines, and other military or religious branches are formed, and the Emperor is still worshipped by humankind as they struggle against hostile forces. Not every empire can look proudly on its triumph. The Galactic Empire of Trantor has ruled for thousands of years across millions of planets at the time of Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. Any truth has been warped by time, as has the location of its ancestral homeland of Earth. Myth claims Trantor was a kingdom, then a republic, then transformed into an empire spanning half the galaxy. The Empire of Trantor became the Galactic Empire when it extended its rule to the other half of the galaxy, but few to know historical accounts detail this rise. Rather than a bang, it was a gradual, incessant rumble. Surprisingly, All three of these empires experienced an ancient war against some version of artificial intelligence, an existential struggle that greatly shaped their future outlooks. Asimov's foundation is linked to humanity's ancient days in the Robot series. The development of positronic brains, the advancement of artificial intelligence, and eventual circumvention of the 3 laws of robotics that prevents robots from harming humans leads ultimately to conflict between humanity and its creation. In a similar vein, Frank Herbert's Ancient Earth relied more and more upon thinking machines until they dominated every aspect of society. It took a great war and anti-machine crusade in the Butlerian Jihad to rid humanity of the machines that had grasped too much power. And in Warhammer 40k, the Men of Iron attack after determining themselves superior to mankind during the Cybernetic Revolt, whose destruction was so complete it led to the Age of Strife. Whether positronic robots, the thinking machines, or the Men of Iron, it seems before the days of Galactic Empire, old human regimes had to contend against the constructs they themselves made. Artificial intelligence and transhumanism are technological hurdles that must be overcome to separate man from metal and ensure the human race is resilient enough to survive galactic crises without dependence on robotics. Those who can't claim historical primacy rise on a tide of blood. The Galactic Empire from Star Wars secures rule in a swift, gruesome coup that replaces the democratic Grand Republic, an institution that had ruled for generations, with Darth Sidious, the Emperor Palpatine's autocratic regime. The betrayal of the Jedi and their allies during the Great Jedi Purge, along with control of the Republic's military apparatus and ruthless pogroms, allowed the Empire to retain much of the old regime's territorial administration. The power brokers of the new Empire laud this day as a triumph over the self-righteous and fanatical Jedi. Paul Atreides' Arrakis Revolt, before it was rewritten as religious propaganda, also elevated him through blood. Muad'Dib's Jihad, as it's later known, claimed over 90 billion lives in its year-long rampage across the Empire. Its aftermath solidified House Atreides' position and secured for the Fremen infamy as the most lethal fighting force ever. Even if their founding differs, Palpatine and Darth Vader are shrouded in dark side mythos and given an air of supernatural primacy, similar to those of Dune, Warhammer, and even the ancient empires of Earth. But the founding of a galactic empire is only its infancy. To truly become great, it must survive the next phases of life. How do civilizations that span millennia and myriad planets mature and maintain rule? A period of furious expansion follows birth and extends the sphere of authority to encompass great swaths of territory, giving shape to a galactic empire. Though usually manifest in physical growth, expansion too can unfold in technological or social advancements. 3 general methods stimulate imperial growth and development: colonization, conquest, and incorporation. Most galactic empires expand through a mixture, but one method usually dominates. For universes in which humanity is the only sapient, intelligent species, colonization is the preferred method. A period of exploration and discovery leads to human colonies seeding thousands of worlds. Since the galaxy is relatively infinite, these mass migrations are often without conflict, as supply far outstrips demand for space or its resources, and fosters cooperation rather than competition. Now, that's not to say the cause of colonization is peaceful. War, overpopulation, or the depletion of planetary resources is often an impetus for humans to leave Earth and take to the stars. In Herbert's Dune, Earth's ancient past held religious minorities such as the Zen Sunni sect of Buddhism in harsh discrimination. This religion combined aspects of both Islam and Buddhist practice, and its people were progenitors of the Fremen. The Zen Sunni and the Jews were persecuted for their faith on a planetary scale during the interspace migrations and the Islamic movements, and so left for other planets to preserve their way of life. For the Zen Sunni, this period was known as the Great Wandering and ended when they reached Arrakis, a planet so inhospitable their oppressors gave up chase. In Asimov's Foundation, development of robotics and positronic brains stimulates an explosion of interstellar travel led by the Spacers. Over thousands of years, the Spacers colonized dozens of worlds and developed a more sophisticated society than that of Earth. As their cultures diverged, mutual contempt arose. Spacers saw Earth people as backwards and disease-ridden, while they themselves were viewed as oppressive elitists, doomed to rely on robots. A further period of unparalleled exploration led to a generation known as the Settlers. These two factions grew into bitter rivals. Though not the direct cause of colonization, Earth is left as a radioactive wasteland destroyed by a forgotten cataclysm. In both the Dune and Foundation universes, humanity is unchallenged by alien races. The galaxy and its wealth are blank canvases, and so settlement of new worlds drives imperial expansion. Conquest is a more direct approach to extending borders when an empire attacks its galactic neighbors or when challenged by an alien threat. Warhammer's Imperium is a galactic empire whose boundaries are ever shifting due to endemic violence that plagues the galaxy. Humanity fights unending war against numerous alien races, collectively referred to as Xenos, and many times the victors add them as their own. The Imperium is xenophobic and views alien races as unclean and deplorable. Their hatred compels the complete eradication of other species before a planet is claimed in the name of the Emperor. There's no integration or assimilation of a conquered planet. Likewise, the Xenos races exterminate all human presence before they assume control of a conquered planet. In a brilliant flash of destruction, history, culture, legacy are all lost to time. A conquest of religion consumes the Carino Empire after Paul Atreides ascends to the Lion Throne as Muad'Dib, the one who points the way, and the Fremen's Messiah, the Lisan al-Gaib. To his warriors, Paul is a holy figure, and they gladly kill and die for him. Fremen are the greatest fighting force in the known universe, and throughout the novel, Paul is plagued by terrible visions of death wrought when their fervor is fully unleashed. He attempts to alter the future, but cannot avoid it, and the religious crusade, known as Muad'Dib's Jihad, spreads across the empire. The Jihad isn't a conflict that sees territory gained or lost, but rather a religious movement that converts or massacres non-believers en masse. All told, dozens of planets are attacked and billions of souls are lost. In this manner, Paul conquers the hearts and minds of the old empire and strengthens the position of his house. His son, Leto, continues this religious violence through use of his fish speakers, an army of zealous fanatics who police, conquer, and spread the divine word of the God Emperor. Star Wars' Galactic Empire is the best example of incorporation to consolidate strength. Following Palpatine's Jedi Purge and with the backing of the Grand Army of the Republic, few could oppose his rise in any coordinated manner. The Galactic Empire took over the existing Republican framework. Besides occasional planetary revolts or small-scale rebellions, the Empire incorporated the administrative, logistic, and bureaucratic model of its predecessor, rather than conquer new lands. After an uncertain transition period, filled mostly with terror and deadly show of military force through stormtrooper legions commanded by Darth Vader, the Sith Lord moved to empower his new role by dissolving the previous government.
The rebellion will continue to gain a support in the Imperial Senate.
The Imperial Senate will no longer be of any concern to us. I have just received word that the Emperor has dissolved the Council permanently. The last remnants of the old Republic have been swept away.
He oversaw military appointments to maintain the loyalty of chief Imperial commanders. He consolidated regional power to a handful of governors, and most striking, Palpatine eventually ordered the dismissal of the Senate, which had for many years been a hollow mockery of its previous role. This dedicated attack on the structure of government gave Palpatine limitless authority and cost him very little in manpower or resources. The Republic merely wore a new face. As the fanfare and explosive excitement of the previous age quiets, a period of cultural maturation and political maintenance follows as nebulous entities settle and form. The bridge that connects expansion and maturation can often be described as a golden age, the apogee or peak of the empire's wealth, influence, and power. Regimes materialize, institutions form, and a stability takes root in the daily lives of the inhabitants. Again, the maturation phase is unique, and galactic empires fall on a spectrum. At one end is an ever-present, oppressive style of rule in which colonies and peripheral regions are constantly strong-armed. The central authority exploits its subordinates while erecting monuments and dedicating histories to its own greatness. They are brutal and squeeze out as many resources as they can, while risking potential rebellion. At the other end of the spectrum is an empire that rules in absentia. It's an unnamed, unidentifiable entity that for many subjects exists beyond their world. Its influence falls into the background as if a myth. These empires are generally benign. Their decrees are loose or marginally enforced. They hold no commanding presence in the daily lives of their subjects, who instead focus on local woes. But their name is often spoken as a stamp of approval or a thinly veiled threat by regional power brokers. A great example of the oppressive style of government is Emperor Palpatine and his ruthless galactic empire. Imperial stormtroopers are a symbol of fear and rigid authority. Countless legions are deployed alongside impressive weapons to police other planets, even the lawless and far-flung Outer Rim worlds, to enforce obedience. The Imperial symbol is plastered across all edifices. Governors and administrators levy harsh taxes, pass strict laws, and mete out punishment for transgression. Star Destroyers interdict their fleets, and TIE fighters patrol space lanes to limit galactic travel or impose blockades. Those who would defy the will of the Emperor look constantly over their shoulder in fear for the approach of Darth Vader, the physical embodiment of a whole galaxy's dread. Excessive force is used to achieve a totalitarian state. In this empire, there is no voice of the people, no opposition to imperial authority. It's no wonder the Galactic Empire draws inspiration from interwar Germany when the Nazi Party of Adolf Hitler imposed a fascist regime through violent oppression. His stormtroopers silenced nonconformists and spread propaganda to solidify power. An example of the benign ruler can be seen in Asimov's Galactic Empire, ruled from the capital world of Trantor. During the maturation phase, the already impressive kingdom of Trantor acquired a massive swath of stellar territory and united to form the first Galactic Empire. As the center of wealth, and physically the closest a planet could be to galactic center, a common phrase within the empire came about. All roads lead to Trantor, and that is where all stars end. Trantor found itself ill-prepared to manage a territory of its scale, and quickly the entire planet was dedicated exclusively to administration. Asimov's empire is still an authoritarian and colonial power that must keep local systems in line, but it does so through largely bureaucratic means. The support or withdrawal of funds, the worry of reprisal through neutron bombing, is an indirect method of control, a far cry away from stormtrooper crackdowns. For most within the empire, Trantor and its government are nothing more than an idea, lacking in substance. This parallels the reality for frontier zones in ancient Rome or border territories in the Mongol or Ottoman empires. Subjects far from the metropole were unlikely to see their emperor or his army, feeling only the subtle pressure of local officials. It's easy to forget that these faceless political organizations, these galaxy-spanning powers, are composed of trillions. What's life like for the average imperial citizen within the stable phase of maturation? Just like the empires under which they live, individual opportunities, anxieties, and struggles are multifaceted, sitting on a broad spectrum from terribly restrictive to surprisingly open. The Carino Empire of Dune is an interesting mix of a rather benign, hands-off imperium that still ruthlessly oppresses the individual. For 10,000 years, the feudalistic society of Carino's rule engendered a strict socio-political hierarchy with little room for movement between strata. Power is consolidated at the top, held by the emperor and the great houses of the Landsrat League. These great houses enjoy the liberties and influence of aristocracy and maintain it dynastically through the family bloodline. Clout is extended to retainers, advisors, and courtiers of each house, and a great house's share of the Imperium's megacorporation, known as Chome, largely determines wealth or political influence. Beyond this small circle, the rest of the Imperium struggles for survival in a social climate of slavery, backstabbing, and greed. Individuals or lesser houses wealthy enough gain access to the spice of Arrakis. This drug not only extends lifespan, it's a status symbol that allows for off-world travel. The Spacing Guild holds monopoly on interstellar transport and requires as payment the precious spice melange. Those unable to secure the drug are doomed to a planet-bound existence, isolated from the rest of the empire. As with real-world feudal societies, the poor, the peasants, the downtrodden of the empire are overlooked or thought of as property. Their role is to work for the honor of their liege lords and scrape a meager existence. This rigid class system is called the Faufrelucus, and it organizes society from the emperor down to the commoner. It was meant to bring order and stability to an empire too vast to control directly, by creating an inverted pyramid of authority, with the most held by the Padishah emperor, then trickling down through great houses, houses minor, small fiefs, and then local populations. Its slogan, "A place for every man and every man in his place," is a sentiment to inspire solidarity, but ironically shows how an oppressive government keeps the discontented from freedom. This is in stark contrast to the Star Wars universe, which, despite having a more forcefully present authority, allows greater social and personal flexibility, where individuals can pursue ambitions, make their own fortunes, and associate with whomever they wish, so long as it remains within the legal imperial sphere. It's a product less of the ruling administration and more of the cultural landscape. Humans are the most common race in Star Wars, but they're hardly the only one. With other species comes a mixing of social norms and philosophies, which leads to more open-mindedness and a limited tolerance. Dune's humanity, meanwhile, has no other sentient species to check their internal anxieties or assertions. Travel is also a significant component, which we'll discuss further a bit later. Individuals can travel cheaply in public transport across the Star Wars galaxy, broadening both their horizons and their opportunities. If they live on a backwater planet or have run out of options, they can simply catch a transport to another system. The citizens of Dune are often too poor to leave their planet, and therefore don't experience the greater Imperium. Additionally, interstellar transport is controlled completely by the Spacing Guild, who can leverage arbitrary constraints to impose travel bans. On average, the citizens of Star Wars experience daily life much the same as we do on Earth. They pursue careers, have generally stable local governance that affords them opportunities to advance in wealth or education. They have time for leisure, and they're allowed to partake in most imperial activities. That being said, marginalized races or planets on the edge of lawlessness are brutally controlled by the Empire's military regime. Troopers gather criminals, political enemies, and races they see as beneath the imperial standard into prison planets, where they're forced to labor until exhaustion takes them, if not massacred wholesale in pogroms. This variance in daily life is natural for any galactic empire, as they span thousands of worlds, each with their own dynamics and structures. Just as restrictive, but even more grim than Dune's Carino Empire, is the reality faced in 40K's Imperium of Mankind. Individuality is lost when Empire spans a galaxy, and humans are viewed as an expendable resource, a metric of production. Hive worlds contain dozens of massive urban superstructures known as hive cities that each support well over 1 billion people. Life for an imperial citizen within the city is one of constant fear, hunger, and menial labor. Crime and corruption are rampant, citizens fall victim to the depredations of local government, and they are easily replaced. Likewise, Forge worlds are planetary factories administered by the Adeptus Mechanicus, the tech priests and engineers of the Imperium, where citizens toil endlessly in hot industrial zones. Most are mechanically or biologically enhanced to perform their duties, and casualty rates are astronomically high. An Imperial citizen has hardly any time for leisure. What they do have is spent watching propaganda hollows about the illustrious Emperor or chanting ritualistic hymns. Brutish and meager are taken to the extreme on frontier worlds or those at risk of Xenos or Chaos invasion. People are slaughtered indiscriminately by alien races or seized with terror by impending doom. Those enlisted in the Planetary Defense Force or Astra Militarum are often sacrificed millions at a time as a delaying tactic until the Imperium's elite fighting forces can respond. People are most often born into an intended role, and very little socio-economic movement takes place. Such brutal oppression often leads to rebellion on various planets or leaves the discontented susceptible to the demonic whispers of chaos. Chaos offers relief from this tragic life, and many disillusioned souls willingly turn their backs on the Imperium to embrace it. All roads lead to Rome. Not only is this idiom a legacy of Roman dominion meant to elevate the eternal city as center of all things, but it's a testament to the ancient empire's logistical ingenuity, without which it could not have expanded to its golden heights. Rome's network of roads and causeways was integral to troop mobilization, commercialization, and cultural assimilation. It wove a great tapestry across the empire, bringing a sense of community and connectedness even to distant hinterlands. How strongly linked provinces are to the central capital and how quickly distance can be traversed has long been a hidden rule that limits imperial growth. If you cannot reach it, you cannot control it. Transportation and its ease of access are equally important to fictional galactic empires. A common denominator that allows them to expand indefinitely is the presence of faster-than-light travel. The ability to near instantaneously travel the breadth of a galaxy renders even the most remote outpost a short trip away. Transportation time is negligible, and thus an empire can exert influence to the farthest reaches. But even so, there are two broad applications of faster-than-light travel that illustrate its criticality. The first is a limitation on who has access to faster-than-light technology and how it's utilized. In Warhammer 40k, the Imperium is patrolled by void ships outfitted with warp drives that allow them to enter the Immaterium, a plane of existence outside real space made completely of seething psychic energy. To enter the Immaterium, also known as the Warp, is a death sentence without a psyker navigator. These humans possess a mutation that allows them to see the Warp with a third eye and safely chart a course through the torrent to precisely re-emerge in real space. Navigators are a necessity for the Imperium. Without them, Imperial troops couldn't respond to Xenos threats in time, and the Empire would fall. Most humans, therefore, remain planet-bound unless Imperial duty calls them elsewhere. But Psykers are also a danger. Their minds are susceptible to warp energies and chaos entities that can result in insanity or demonic possession. Warhammer draws inspiration from Frank Herbert's Dune, in which the Spacing Guild of Navigators holds exclusive monopoly on interstellar travel, and they themselves are limited by access to spice melange, a substance required for them to make faster-than-light navigation. Therefore, those who don't have the Guild's silent approval are doomed to remain planet-bound. In Dune's far future, after the fall of House Carino, an even more severely constrained network can be seen in the tyranny of God Emperor Leto II. Under Leto's rule, spice was severely limited and gathered exclusively by the Emperor. Leto so greatly limited commerce and transportation that most imperial worlds devolved into largely pastoral, decentralized planets, whose citizens relied on basic carts or sleds for movement. This regression impacted social customs. Without it, thoughts couldn't intermingle and rebellious notions couldn't spread. People were isolated and thus subservient to the God Emperor, which allowed his golden path to flourish. The second is quite the opposite, where there's no barrier to entry, where it's not reserved for the elite or only those with necessary skill. This type of transportational freedom exists in the Star Wars and Foundation universes. Individuals possess private ships equipped with hyperdrive or warp engines, and those who can't afford can easily buy fare on public transports. The freedom of movement has a cultural impact too. It allows for exchange of ideas and commerce. It generates socio-economic mobility, and it creates a melting pot climate. But these benefits can be seen as liabilities for policing bodies that find it difficult to impede movement of rival or rebellious factions. Regardless of application, the development of faster-than-light travel is imperative in both expansion and maturation of an empire. When authority spans an entire galaxy and encompasses trillions of subjects, it invites fate. The threat to the empire increases exponentially with its size and lifespan, and not only from outside sources, but significantly from internal discontent. Frontiers are difficult to defend. Far-flung, mostly independent colonies foster contrary thought and foment rebellion. So how is it that many of these galactic empires last not just centuries, but millennia? The The status quo is maintained largely through political inertia. If we imagine our own countries, the speed at which the government acts can be unbearably slow, if it moves at all. Bureaucrats and oligarchs whose influence gives them the keys to power are loath to give up such luxuries, and so often act in the interest of continuing the present. Now, expand this out to tens of thousands of planets, and we can begin to understand how difficult it can be to get much of anything done. In physics, inertia is directly proportional to the mass of an object. The larger the object, the greater its inertia. Galactic empires encompass such great political mass that only reality-altering events can provide enough force to catalyze change. A single voice for progress is drowned out among the multitudes, and life continues unchanged. Additionally, the seat of power is largely a fantasy for many galactic citizens. They know there is an emperor, they may see images of the imperial likeness on currency, buildings, or statues, but they never see this individual in person. For them, the emperor is a nebulous figure that by and large doesn't impact their daily life. Though succession might be fraught with intrigue in the imperial capital, for the greater empire there's little change from one autocrat to another. An average citizen might not even know who the current emperor is, much less the line of succession. The throne is a constant, and not to be questioned, so long as it doesn't impact them directly. When an emperor interrupts the status quo and inserts themselves constantly on their populace, the galactic hegemony can't last long. Emperor Palpatine is an exemplar of how to ensure a brief reign. By using force to impress his authority on the galaxy, the Emperor unsettles the daily life of his people, and so they take notice. Stormtroopers become symbols of oppression rather than security. The feared Darth Vader is a boogeyman to fight against in secret. Involvement in the affairs of individual planets and systems leads largely to the Emperor's demise, as his presence sparks popular rebellion. This is why the Star Wars Galactic Empire's short lifespan is unique among those discussed. A tragic fall succeeds the height of power and influence felt in the maturation phase. What leads to the inevitable decline that pulls the Empire from stability to tumult in the Age of Decline? The answer to this question is nuanced. Many different pressures, both within and without, degrade authority. For both Dune and Foundation, decadence and complacency seep into the Empire. Stagnation undermines resilience. As the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood states, people generally prefer the predictable. Few understand how destructive this can be, how it imposes limitations on variability and makes whole populations vulnerable. The Padishahs of House Carino busy themselves ever more with the distractions of their paradise world. They care only for profit and what influence it can buy. Many cease to attend court functions and blind themselves to schemes of other noble families. House Carino's infamous Sardaukar soldiers at the time of Shaddam IV haven't truly been tested in many decades. Their legions grow soft and rely more on the myth of their invincibility than their actual skill. And Carino rule has over centuries created a system of governance in which assassination, extortion, and backstabbing are the norm. Great houses weaken each other as they jockey for CHOAM shareholdings and control spice stores. This institutional machinery results in decay. Bureaucracy destroys initiative. Improvements always make those at the top look inept. Who enjoys looking inept? Rot likewise festers within the imperial capital of Trantor. During the time surrounding the Foundation series, it's in an unstoppable decline. It strives to maintain an aura of invincibility, but lacks the strength to prevent periphery worlds from breaking away. Trantor's government grows increasingly negligent and inept. The Galactic Empire is so expansive that nearly all of Trantor's 40 billion people are required to administer. As the Encyclopedia Galactica's entry on the planet puts it, this enormous population was devoted almost entirely to the administrative necessities of empire, and found themselves to be few for the complications of the task. It's to be remembered that the impossibility of proper administration of the Galactic Empire under the uninspired leadership of the later emperors was a considerable factor in the fall. Its dependence upon the outer worlds for food and indeed for all necessities of life made Trantor increasingly vulnerable to conquest by siege. A bloated bureaucracy blinds Trantor to the Empire's misgivings. They're focused entirely on the management of an empire that they're paralyzed and ultimately unable to lead it. As Trantor's military power wanes, the frontier zone of the periphery grows larger and thousands of planets revolt or declare their independence. The administrative machine built over millennia can't contend with this violent wave for change. The decline of both Star Wars and later the Second of Dune's galactic empires were strikes of lightning, sharp falls from a precipice rather than gradual descents, due, I think, to two reasons. Both were exceedingly centralized for a galactic entity. Palpatine and the God Emperor maintained absolute authority and held tightly to the reins of power, so that not even their loyal governors wielded much. Both, also, were stifling and oppressive to their populations, which only fanned the flames of revolution. The ruthless manner in which authority was maintained, the fear and exploitation, secured the Empire in the short term, but such a great pressure could only be contained for so long before the citizens exploded in violence.
No star system will dare oppose the Emperor now.
The more you tighten your grip, Tarkin, the more star systems will slip through your fingers.
Though open opposition was swiftly silenced in Star Wars' Imperial Senate, underground factions and rogue individuals coordinated across the galaxy in rebellion. And for Leto II, it's the shadow factions, so long denied, that worked to undo him. The God Emperor is unique, however, in that he foresaw and even indirectly brought his own death, as it was a necessary sacrifice to preserve his golden path. All of these galactic failings are united in a similar theme: decline of an external threat and subsequent internal strife. Adversity is necessary for vigor. Things must be challenged constantly to maintain strength. Just as we test our bodies at the gym and minds with puzzles, empires too must face difficulty to keep stagnation at bay. Both Dune's Carino and Foundation's Galactic Empire faced no clear external threat. They essentially ruled the known universe. There was nothing to unite citizens under a common banner, so they looked to their own woes. An internal decline is insidious and often only realized with the benefit of hindsight. Palpatine's and Leto's totalitarian regimes proved too iron-fisted from their inception to harmonize with the people. In many ways, true power lies with the masses, and if they aren't placated, they will just as quickly supplant their rulers. Only 40K's Imperium is challenged constantly by war from external sources. The Army, Navy, and Special Forces fight against Xenos and agents of chaos. The threat of destruction unites all of humankind. Though an individual might suffer under the Emperor, it's a far better life than obliteration at the hands of Necrons or Tyranids. This could be why the Emperor is able to maintain control, and also why the Imperium, though greatly diminished from its Golden Age splendor, isn't dead and doesn't suffer as great a decline as the other empires. Nothing lasts forever. The fact that all of these galactic empires, regardless of their sometimes long lives, eventually expire, proves this axiom. The death of an empire is violent and chaotic. The dissolution of the Mongol Empire, the Macedonian Empire, and the Roman Empire, to name just three of many, signaled a collapse of security and law. As these institutions died, they contracted. They turned on themselves, and a power vacuum was soon filled with doom. The death of a galactic empire is magnified 100-fold, filled with uncertainty as individuals grasp what little they can, resorting to bloodshed in the name of self-preservation. The fact that it's a major fulcrum moment is precisely why so many stories transpire in the death throes of imperial reign. They offer compelling narratives of change on a grand scale. In the Foundation series, the death of the Galactic Empire is seen as a cataclysmic and inevitable event that will plunge mankind into a 30,000-year dark age, as technologies and institutions are lost. In this light, the Empire's exploitative, autocratic rule is a necessary evil. It establishes order which allows the galaxy to flourish. Though it's drowning in bureaucracy and corruption, if the Empire's skeletal framework were to vanish, all would crumble, and the pieces would be scattered with such force that it couldn't be rebuilt for millennia. Though they might not hold any love for the Galactic Empire, many citizens fear the instability and death caused by its collapse. A tumultuous period, known as the Interregnum, predicted by the creator of psychohistory, Harry Seldon. Seldon's method uses human psychology and sociology combined with its extensive history to calculate probabilities of future events. He forecasts the death of the Empire and subsequent Dark Age before a new empire can be established. Though it's unavoidable, the Dark Age can be shortened, which is the sole purpose of the Foundation. Clearly, Empire is the pinnacle and preferred model of galactic government, as so many fear the lawlessness that emerges without a central power. The first and second Foundationers are Trantor's legacy. They look to the days of the Galactic Empire as a golden age for humanity, and hope that their actions will bring about a renaissance. This attitude contrasts greatly with those held by the many star systems oppressed by the Star Wars Galactic Empire. Its death comes from within following a roughly 4-year-long civil war. The increasingly brutal empire, the unequal consolidation of wealth and power, the supposed inviolability of the Emperor, sowed the seeds for discontent and united various factions into the rebel alliance. With gathered strength, they openly defied the Emperor and launched several coordinated strikes against the military. The Galactic Civil War ultimately ended with Darth Vader's redemption and the death of Emperor Palpatine. Without Palpatine, who commanded absolute authority, the Empire instantly dissolved into fiefdoms ruled by warlords that fought against one another as much as they did against the restored Galactic Republic. The rebels celebrated the Empire's fall. So hateful towards and afraid of a return to autocracy, they gutted the imperial body. They saw Palpatine's rule as a cruel tyranny. Though the eventual rise of the First Order decades after the Civil War suggests there are still imperial sympathizers, or those wishing to trade all for ambition, much of the galaxy views the short-lived Empire as a thing to avoid at all costs. The collapse of the Atreides Empire in Dune mirrors Star Wars in its rapidity. Like Palpatine, God Emperor Leto II exerted absolute authority, his iron grip so constant that when it finally relented following his death, the released pressure exploded across the cosmos. What immediately unfolded was a period known as the Famine Times, in which star systems were isolated and depleted of resources. People were slaughtered in droves, marauding bands and petty rulers sought to assume the mantle of a new empire. The tumult of the Famine Times, however, led to the scattering, which was part of Leto's golden path, and humankind as a race was eventually spared from extinction. The scattering was wild and random movement, goaded by a profound fear of stagnation and death. With such fear driving them, the lost ones were destined never to completely follow the irreparable cycle of imperial decline. In the final books of Dune, Leto's empire has been gone for millennia, but his presence still lingers to guide mankind into an uncertain future.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
I don't know, at least twice a day.
But I probably don't think about it every day. Probably like every other day, maybe.
A lot. Like 30.
At least 3 times a week.
Though many of the most successful and engaging galactic empires in fiction draw inspiration from their predecessors, nearly all have root in the customs and histories of ancient Rome. The Roman Empire was one of the largest, longest-lived, innovative, and well-documented empires in Western history. The events that surrounded it echo with similarity across its galactic counterparts, and its shadow is cast on them all. From a foundation that blurred myth and history, to an imperium that ruthlessly supplanted more republican forms of government, to an overextended machine that ultimately fell to corruption, stagnation, and outside pressures, Rome is the prime example of the imperial model and captured the minds of those who invented these great fictional universes. With such consistency, it makes one wonder if this is the form and the life cycle a real galactic empire might take in our own distant future. Only time will tell. Thanks so much for watching this analysis on the rise and fall of galactic empires. I appreciate the support and hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on the life cycle of empires, which empire is most intriguing, what you'd like to contribute to the discussion, as well as suggestions for future videos in the comments below. See you in the next one.